Steve Wiltfong here with Minnesota head coach PJ Fleck as we welcome him to 24/7 Sports Social Distance. How you doing, Coach? This is weird times for us in the country, but you and I were able to take care of our hair under these circumstances, unlike so many other people across America at this point.
Yeah, Steve, thanks for having us on the show. Obviously, we appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's simple. You walk around, see people in grocery stores, see them all over the place. And looks like they haven't got a haircut in 6 years, and here we are. I mean, we're freshly shaven, looking good. I think more people need to shave their head in America right now. It maybe help.
Coach, just how have you navigated this with your football team, staying in touch with the guys? How often are you in contact with your players and talking to them and making sure they're doing all the things they need to be doing, as they obviously aren't in spring ball right now?
Yeah, I mean, recruiting is a major focus of what we're doing right now, but the number one focus is our team and our players. You know, there's a lot. Basically, coaches should be on the road recruiting right now when you look at the actual calendar, and we're not. We're actually in meetings, position meetings, unit meetings, team meetings. We're actually getting extended football, which is, I think, very beneficial for them. As long as you're doing it right, everybody has their own formula. We feel like we have a really good formula, but we're in contact every single day with them, academically, athletically, socially, spiritually, making sure that their life is surrounded by resources every single day. But I think they're doing really well. It's fun to get on the phone with them. It's fun to be able to have team meetings. It's fun to see their face. We usually give them about 5 minutes before a team meeting or 5 minutes before a unit meeting, all to kind of go back and forth. And it's hilarious to listen to them talk to each other when they haven't seen each other for months now. And I think they all appreciate that time.
Coach, you were an elementary education major in Northern Illinois. Did you go to NIU with the anticipating teaching social studies in elementary school, or did you want to be a football coach from the get-go?
Well, I knew I wanted to be a football coach or a coach of some sort, whether I was going to teach in high school or elementary school and then coach in high school level, you know, after school, things like that. You know, my mom was a special education assistant, and I kind of grew up around education in a special education school, helping out and working in the office at times, and just watching my mom kind of go through the special education type life. And it was very humbling, very rewarding as well. And I think that's a lot where our philanthropy comes from, and what we want to do is to serve and give and be involved in the Children's Hospital and be involved in people who are going through really difficult times, especially children. And I think that's where that soft spot comes from. But the education piece is, I've always wanted to be a teacher. And then once you kind of play and keep playing, you never really want to give that up. And so when you can coach, you can be part of football plus teach football. It's kind of the best of both worlds.
Now, did you student teach during your time in Northern Illinois?
I did, yeah. I student taught, yep, at Clinton Rosette Middle School in DeKalb, Illinois, and had a great time in 6th grade. And it was wonderful. So if I wasn't coaching and I didn't coach, I would have been around that middle school level. I always liked the middle school. And a lot of people say, oh, the middle school, stay away from those, you know, take the elementary school kids and the high school kids. But that middle, people are like, oh, I don't know. I love that age. There are so many changes in young people at that time. I mean, you're talking about, you see everything. The spectrum is so wide. And I guess it's kind of like a police officer that likes to work in the city. There's constant action. Middle school, there's constant action. There's constant issues, problems, situations. And every day brought something new. And I think that's what I enjoyed about it.
Did you bring this kind of energy that you have with your row the boat culture to world regions as you were teaching it? And the students, how'd they respond to you? You know, obviously you were a good football player at Northern Illinois. How did that element help you in reaching those kids?
Well, you're always competing, right? I still remember when I was a student teacher at the time. And I was student teaching. I had a wonderful, wonderful teacher that allowed me to actually teach during my student teaching time. I mean, almost the entire time. And I remember I wanted to be the best teacher in that building. I mean, even when I was student teaching, I'm like, I'm going to be the best teacher in this entire building, let alone students that are just doing their deal. And I always said that I want people to be able to look in our classroom and say, I want to be in Mr. Fleck's class. I want to be in that. That is, they're learning, but boy, are they having fun doing it. And then have, you know, the older teacher grab that person and say, get back in here and put her in it, put that person back in her room or something, or his room. I wanted to have that energy. I wanted to have that positivity. I loved my education growing up. I loved the teachers I had. I mean, I still have a great relationship with my first grade teacher, Mrs. Jacobson. Think about that. I'm 39. I still have a great relationship with my first grade teacher. She comes to football games. She lives in Illinois, comes to the U of I game all the time, the Northwestern game, any game she can make. So it's really neat. So I had great teachers around me who made me fall in love with education and teaching and the process of that. And I always had teachers that made it really fun. I also had teachers who made it horribly not fun. And I got the best of both worlds to be able to see that spectrum. And I always wanted to be towards that fun, exciting, passionate, maybe hard at times, but it got everybody involved. And when you're in elementary education, you got to find 36 ways to teach 36 sixth graders ancient Rome 36 different ways, which creates, I think, the program we have today at the University of Minnesota. It's an exciting, positive, energetic, passionate, purposeful culture that teaches life and football.
PJ, you talk about wanting to be the best teacher in the building. I remember visiting you at Western Michigan, and you had a newspaper clipping in the back, or a magazine article that said you were the worst coach in college football at the time, coming off that winless season at Western Michigan, your first go-around with them. When you think back on your life, when do you think you became an aim at the bullseye guy? You say you wanted to be the best teacher in the school. You wanted to be the best coach in college football. When do you remember saying, I got to be the best at this?
I think just growing up, my dad would always, I'd come back in from playing and my dad be like, what you doing? I'm like, well, I just got done playing. Are you done for the day? He'd ask. I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, just so you know, somebody out there is shooting one more basket than you. So when you get older and you don't make the NFL or the NBA or whatever it was at the time, he goes, you'll remember back to these times. You can do what you want. He never told me what to do, but he gave me that Catholicism guilt, right? Of just, here it is. And I went back out there and shot more free throws, or went back out there and caught more footballs or whatever it was. Cause I think he always knew I was going to be a runt. My dad's not a very big guy. I'm only 5'8", 5'9". And so I think he always had me playing this underdog role within myself. If there was a 9-year-old baseball team, I must have been 7 playing on it. Back then, you probably didn't have to actually show like a birth certificate of exact ages that you were, like the Little League World Series these days. But for me, it was, if there's a 9-year-old team, I was 7. So I was constantly always playing with players and kids that were better than me. So I had to raise my level of competition. And then when you start playing, varsity as a freshman in high school, you learn real fast of what the world's like, where, you're playing in front of some people, seniors, and the family members don't like my family members. And that person probably doesn't like me because now a freshman's playing in front of them. So I learned at a very young age that I had some type of athleticism, maybe some type of gift that I could be able to do something with. And if I was going to do something, I was going to find a way to be the best at it. It was the best or nothing. And I think that's how I was raised, in a good way, not just the kind of cutthroat where it was winning at all costs. It was more, you can become anything you want to become. Now that's a choice. And if you want that, here's what you're going to have to do. And I think I was raised that way at the beginning of my life to know that.
Your whole career at Canelan High and in high school, was the goal to make it to the NFL the whole time?
It was. I kept it to myself, though, because, Steve, I'm not the biggest guy. I graduated high school. I was 5'9", 150 pounds. I set all the Illinois State receiving records, but literally, I don't think I would have recruited me. Okay, so when you start to look at me, I sat there and thought, okay, well, I know I want to play in the NFL. I know, I averaged 24.5 points a game in basketball. I wanted to play in the NBA, but I knew that if I start saying to other people, I dream of playing in the NBA or I dream of playing in the NFL, people look at you and there'd be more people squashing my dreams and helping me with my dreams. And it wasn't until I got to college and Joe Novak told me my junior year saying, hey, you got a chance, and you got a chance to play in the NFL if you keep doing what you're doing. And he was one of the first people that ever said that in my life. Now, my mom and dad said that, but he was one of the first people professionally that ever said, don't be shocked if you're playing in the NFL in 2 years. And I was like, wow, he actually believes that. And that might be the only person that believes it besides me, but now I can start, working towards that.
You say you wouldn't have recruited yourself, but I feel like you have an eye for guys like yourself on the trail, regardless of the position. When you look at Western Michigan, taking that program and winning 13 games in your last season, which is the only double-digit win season in Western Michigan history, finishes ranked in the top 15 nationally, goes to a New Year's Six game. And now at Minnesota, 11-2 this past year, the school's first top 10 finish since 1962. You beat 2 top 10 teams this past year. And I think you do it, from my vantage point, by recruiting guys that have not only upside at their respective positions, but a certain mentality. And you go back and you look at yourself, you were a 4-year varsity guy on the football team. You said you averaged 24 points a game in basketball. I feel like you had the makeup of a guy that you were recruited.
Yeah, but I was just a worker. I was annoying. I'm one of those people that would just see how many times I could turn you up and down the court in basketball. Once in a while, you dribble it off your foot, and I'd get an easy layup. I just never got tired. We have a saying in our program, let the other guy get tired. And so when we're talking about, I don't know, when I say I don't know if I would have recruited myself, I wouldn't have recruited myself if it wasn't for Joe Novak. See, nobody on the Northern Illinois staff wanted me. I got the last scholarship, and I was going to walk on to actually the University of Wisconsin to play basketball. I was gonna do everything I could to go walk on there. And I remember I get this scholarship, and I committed immediately before it even got out of Joe Novak's mouth, because it was somebody who believed in me. And he said that this is the head coach's decision. This is the one scholarship that whatever you assistants say, this is the guy that I'm going to take. Now, we were on a 26-game losing streak. How do you recruit people like me? A lot of people didn't want to go. And so I had an opportunity. But I don't know if I would have recruited me without Joe Novak. Now that Joe Novak did that for me, I always look for the how, the spirit, the unconquerable will of every player. We look for the right fit in our institution. I'm not for everybody, and I get that. I'm a major overachiever. I want overachievers, and it doesn't matter what star you are. Corey Davis was a 2-star, no offer recruit, and ended up being the 5th pick in the draft because of his how. We call ourselves How University, because if you don't have how, it doesn't matter how good you are. We want how. We want the fit. We want the necktie mentality, the overachiever type mentality, no matter what. And we want that how inside you. What you do doesn't matter. How you do something truly makes you who you are.
You hear stories like Kirk Ferentz was the guy that was on the table for Josie Jewell, who obviously went on to be a great Big Ten linebacker for them. Coach Novak on the table for you. Is there a guy in your career, maybe a player on Minnesota's roster right now, where you looked at your staff and said, hey, we're taking this guy, and he's already making a difference for y'all?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll start with the quarterback, Tanner Morgan. Tanner was told by a lot of people that he'd never play in college football. And I remember, there was going to be guys we recruited that was taller, that were bigger, that were stronger, had a bigger arm. And I still remember Kirk Sherrock and I talking about that, having a conversation about Tanner. And, all we heard from Tanner was what he wasn't going to become. What we felt was what he was going to become, because of all the things we talked about: the fit, the how, the necktie, the spirit, this overachiever. He rebuilt his high school. And we needed somebody to do that at Western Michigan, as well as Zach Terrell. But then when we went to Minnesota, we needed to bring somebody that had that. And that's why we brought him with us. And look what he's done. And he was told by numerous people he would never play in the Big Ten. He's second team All Big Ten, had 2 of the greatest performances in the history of the Big Ten this past year, statistically. I would probably say him, and I would probably even say on the offensive side of the ball, a guy by the name of John Michael Schmitz, because he's one of our 6 starting offensive linemen. We call him 6 starting offensive linemen because he was a guy that people said that, he's a little too short, a little too sawed off. But I know this, I would never, I would always want John Michael Schmitz next to me in a very dark alley. But I would not want to be without him if I was alone. I need him. And he's one of those guys that's just an overachiever. And he's worked himself into the starting 6 when you're looking at the group of 5 at times and saying, will that guy even be good enough? So those are some of the guys that I would probably say right now that we offered that were times when maybe it wasn't the most popular decision.
Let's talk about Tanner. I think he had statistically maybe the best season a Minnesota quarterback has ever had for the Gophers. Is he a Heisman candidate at some point? Is he a high draft pick? You almost had him at Western Michigan, and now 11 wins later for Minnesota.
Yeah, first of all, Tanner's one of those kids that can become anything they want to become. He's a gym rat. He's an overachiever. I've been very fortunate as a head coach because I've had 2 kids at quarterback. This is going to be my 8th year being a head coach. And basically, I've had 2 kids at quarterback when you look at it, right? And the consistency has been really, really good for us. Zach Terrell was an overachiever and went from 1-11 as a starter his first year to 13-1 and led us to a championship his senior year. Tanner Morgan came in, won some games, lost some games. He wasn't even the starter right away with Zach Annexstead, and then basically never gave the job back, and now he's all Big Ten. But I think the sky's the limit for him. Is he ever going to be 6'5"? No, but who cares? Drew Brees isn't 6'5" either. Now, am I saying he's Drew Brees? No, but he's somebody that's going to be put in a Drew Brees category. The Miami Dolphins passed on Drew Brees. There's a lot of people that couldn't look past his measurables. he's got intangibles through the roof. I mean, he's so gifted on and off the field. He's one of the best leaders I've ever seen, and he makes everybody around him better. And he's the most genuine person you'll ever meet. And he is the most fierce competitor we have on our team. If there's one guy outworking everybody else in the country, it's that guy. And I don't know, I can't say that for a fact, but if I had to bet everything that I have on that, I would. It's easy because of the type of kid he is. But I do think that, you know, if people look past where he's at technically and his size and strictly look at who makes their team the best, and if you get the results at the end of the day, absolutely he'd be up there. And then you're talking about draftability. I mean, it just depends on, as he keeps going forward, the success he has, and then who falls in love with him. But somebody will. I mean, we haven't had a quarterback drafted since the 70s. He has the potential to be the first one for sure. I mean, without a doubt, and a high pick, in my opinion.
Coach, let's go back to the beginning of your coaching career, GA at Ohio State. After a couple years with the 49ers, just what were your biggest takeaways from that job that maybe you still apply to what you're doing as a head coach now?
Yeah, you know, everybody wants to be coached. I think that's what I learned from the NFL. There's always a stigma at times where people get to the NFL and says, oh, well, it's not like the college game. I mean, they don't want to be coached. You know, they're making too much money. Well, I've coached Vincent Jackson, a 3-time Pro Bowler by the time I got there. We're the same age. I'm a first-year wide receiver coach in the NFL, and Vincent's already gone to the Pro Bowl. He's never started in the Pro Bowl, but he's been in the Pro Bowl. And here I am making $180,000 or something like that, $200,000. Well, Vincent Jackson's making $55 million. And I remember thinking, like, if this doesn't go well, I highly doubt the $55 million guy is going to be to blame. It's going to be me. And so I learned from day one is that everybody wants to be coached. However, everybody's going to see if you can make them better. And if you can make them better and what you say is real and it's authentic and it can make people better in life and football, I think you'll have everybody in the room captivated and they'll listen to you. They're ready to be taught. But I think that you have to have trust. With trust, you got to have three things. You've got to have the consistency, right? You've got to be able to have proof all the time, and you've got to be able to have time. And I thought with Vincent Jackson, he gave me time, he gave me consistency, and at the end of the day, he wanted proof. And once I gave that to him, he was all in. Same thing with Mike Williams. Both of those guys had their best year in their careers the year I was coaching them. Not because of me, because of them. But as a coach, even in the NFL, we got the most out of them. And I think that's incredible to know that every kid wants to be coached. But as coaches, sometimes we just think of the word coach and we should be respected because of our word and our authority. Well, these days, people want to know, can you make me better? Can you take me to where I've dreamed of being? And if you can, I think people they captivate towards you and they trust you, and then you can run and go. So everybody wants to be coached is the biggest lesson I learned from that. If you're willing to be the best coach you can be and help them in all areas of their life.
You were a GA at Ohio State. You guys go to the national title game. That's your first time coaching in that kind of role. What did Coach Tressel allow you to do in your GA role and just your takeaways from working for him?
You know, one thing I'll say about Jim Tressel, he's one of the ultimate influencers of my entire life, on the field, off the field. You know, even when I went through some personal times, he was right there for me. He had gone through very similar things, and he was right there for me. And here I am in a GA form. I wasn't a player for him. I wasn't a full-time coach. I was a GA. But I did everything from make the coffee to make calls on the field. He allowed me to have this entire spectrum. And back then, you only had 2 GAs. You had one on offense, one on defense. You know, I still remember a call I screwed up against Indiana. I was a special teams GA as well as the offensive GA. So you talk about the responsibilities. Well, there wasn't a call going on the headset. And Paul Haynes was at the time in charge of the punt unit. And I remember Paul Haynes now works for me. And nobody gave a call, so I just gave the call. Well, I gave the wrong call, but at least I gave a call. And Jim Tressel was like, who called that? And I was like, well, that was me, Coach. He's like, that's the last call you'll ever call again until you get your first full-time job. And I was like, well, at least I called it. I made a mistake. I know that was a bad call, and, you know, I'll learn from that one. But Jim taught me how to care for everyone in the organization, and I mean everyone, not just your players, not just your staff, who deserve you to care for them in every area of their life, but the custodians that clean your building, from the administration to the donors to the boosters to everyone, every other sport, every other head coach, every assistant coach, every family member. He cared for everyone. And I've never seen a coach care as much as Jim Tressel and about everyone in the organization. And I think that's what I took most from him.
Seems like your confidence is unshaken. You make the bad play call there. You lose the nickel state at Western Michigan. What keeps the motor running there?
Well, we define failing as growth, failure as quit. And on the way to success, you have to have both. You have to fail and you have to succeed. But in the failing department, it gets dissected into two things, failing and failure. You get to decide. When you fail, you get to continue to be failing, or you get to be a failure. So you quit. I decided never to quit. I just considered to take it, grow, and row, and move forward, and continue to use it as basically experience as you go forward to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I have failed way more than I've been successful. I've made more mistakes than I've made right decisions. But as you keep learning, the more failing you have, there's a bigger consequence usually out of that doesn't feel so good. And so you're probably not going to do that same thing twice. And you constantly just build this Rolodex. But most people never want to go back. They build a wall to their failings and failure, and they kind of quit thinking about it. I constantly think about that. I constantly recall failings because those are the only things we can actually learn from is our past. Succeeding, failing, we can learn from all that because it's already happened.
That Ohio State team you were GA for, that it makes the national title game. So you've seen a semblance of what that looks like in your career. But obviously the way Ohio State builds their roster is going to be different than y'all. You won 11 last year. How does Minnesota go from 11 wins to 13 or 14?
Well, our slogan for the year is do it better for longer. We did it a lot better. We did smarter, not harder last year. We were way smarter. We picked 6 in the West, and we just had to do things smarter, right? We had to get our best guys to game day. We had to be able to look at everything in our program and just do it smarter. What was going to give us more of an advantage? Not just saying, hey, more work is better work. If it required more and that was better, we did it. If it didn't, then we didn't do it. It was a dissection of our entire program from top to bottom of how we could be able to be smarter and not just work harder and have this, we did more. This year's doing it better. Finding a way to do it better, not only better, but for longer. We now know that, we kind of came out of nowhere last year, and not to say that's easier to do, but we knew that the pressure that we put on ourselves was going to be greater than the pressure that we got from the media at the beginning of the year. Now, when you're 9-0, that kind of connects and equals and comes together. This year, the pressure and the expectation from the outside world is going to be loudest. We need to make sure that our pressure and expectation inside is louder than that, because now as you start to build a house, we talked about this year in terms of building a house, last year was the framework. This is the window part where people can look in your windows and now see exactly what you're doing. You're not going to come out of nowhere. Once the windows are built, people look in those windows just to see where everybody is. So we have to constantly look out our windows, see where we want to go, and constantly change rooms, move rooms, continue to make our house better. But we know people are watching us, and we know that the expectation on the outside world is going to be higher. But our inside expectations have to be more massive than that.
5 players drafted from Minnesota this past year, which is a program record. Can you guys do this year in, year out? Is there enough do you guys have the talent to win a national championship in Minnesota?
Well, I think we're building the talent to be able to win a national championship. I think we have the talent. What we have to continue to do is keep building the skill. I think players win championships. When you have a player-led team, this is a player's game, always has been. Coaches get a lot of attention, but I've been on a lot of teams that we just didn't have the ammo, and we were really bad coaches. I've been on some really good teams where we had the ammo, and I've been a really good coach. That's the one thing I like about our career. Our coaches, we've been 1-11, been the worst coach in America, and then we've also been coach of the year 3 times. So we've seen the whole spectrum, and what's the common denominator? Elite players, elite people. And that's what we're going to continue to do. Now, we'll never, ever trade our how, our fit, our necktie mentality, our spirit, our heart, our unconquerable will. That's the fit. That's the how university. We'll never compromise that, ever. That'll never change in our recruiting philosophy. What can change, though, as we get more proof, right? Time, consistency, proof, and people start to trust our program as a blue blood more, then what you're going to be able to see is that skill go up. The talent is the heart, the spirit, the unconquerable will of a person, but the skills, those measurables, so skill could go up. And that's what I think you're starting to see in our recruiting a little bit. We're getting more of a skillful player with the right fit as well. And Rashad Bateman is a great example of that. Well, instead of 1 Rashad Bateman, if we can get 10 Rashad Batemans, that's a better football team, in my opinion, right? If instead of one Tanner Morgan, if we get 10 Tanner Morgans, that's a better football team. So I think we're on our way to doing that. I think we've got a lot of work to do, but that is our ultimate vision. It's to be a national championship program and bring those blue blood times back, to restore those times in Minnesota of those 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, because we are a top 5 most traditional program in all of college football. We have 7 national titles, 18 Big Ten championships. We just haven't done it for over a half a century. And we've got to be that bridge that connects it.
Coach, speaking of Rashad Bateman, your first year, you guys don't make a bowl game at Minnesota. In hindsight, was that a good thing for you to be able to just focus all your attention on recruiting and continue to build that nucleus for what this football team is now, and keep guys like Rashad Bateman in the fold with other schools? He's from Georgia and those SEC schools trying to get the spatula out and flip them.
Yeah, I don't think losing's ever a really good thing. I don't think you sit there and say, hey, we lost just enough games to get some recruits, because you're always selling a vision. You're always selling what you're going to be able to do, and you know what you can do. But when you're not very good, that's hard to do. But what you have to do is, I think now is a little easier, right? Because you have that trust and that time, consistency, proof, where Rashad Bateman didn't have that, right? And so those guys, right at that point, didn't have the trust and the proof and the time and the consistency. They had to be able to truly buy the vision and had to be that trailblazer, which is very difficult to do. And I never sit there and say, man, I loved losing all those games, because you're a competitor. You want to win them. But I thought that we got exactly what we deserved that first year and at Western Michigan. And we were never willing to compromise the culture or the program for a victory. I mean, we had guys missing class and they weren't going to play. It didn't matter how good you were. We had guys that weren't willing to do the right things off the field. No, you weren't going to play. And we still have that philosophy to this day. It doesn't mean we don't give other chances and more chances, but we have high expectations here, because your life better be really important to you if you want to play at the University of Minnesota. Those dreams better be actual dreams, not just intentions. Those better be intentional action dreams, and then you'll fit like a glove with us, because your whole life's got to be important to you in all 4 areas: academically, athletically, socially, and spiritually. And we feel like we've got those guys on our football team, and that we're recruiting to that as well.
Coach, you have the top 5 class in the country right now in 24/7 sports. What do you think has been the medicine or the recipe for that?
I think it goes all to our staff. Our general manager, Garrett Chernoff, doesn't get enough credit. I mean, you talk about somebody who helps run the entire program. I've known Garrett for a long time. He's one of my best friends. He's an ultimate worker, ultimate necktie, ultimate how. If there's one person that cares as much or even more than me in the program, it's Garrett Chernoff. And his recruiting staff has done a great job of, they can't necessarily do all the recruiting like our coaches, but the organization, the detail, the creativity, the not allowing the circumstance to dictate our behavior. He deserves all the credit. And if you look at our staff, I think our staff's working harder now at home than they did if we'd be out in the office or out recruiting right now. And I think the best cultures, most creative people, and the best teams, whether that's recruiting or football, will come out of this ahead. They won't allow the situation to dictate their behavior. They're going to find unique new ways to be able to recruit, to develop. I think over half of our recruits that are actually committed to us haven't even visited campus yet. And you're talking about, how do you bring all of that to them? How do you do that when somebody's visited a campus 4 or 5 times and win a battle that way? So our staff is doing such an amazing job. And this is the best staff I've ever had. Top to bottom, we have 6 former head coaches on our staff. I got to pinch myself to make sure this is my staff. It's real. Like, this is how you build a dream staff. And I'm so thankful for all the work that they do. And they deserve all the credit. But it goes down to consistency, the creativity, and finding a way to not let the circumstance dictate the behavior, and let the culture kick in. Let the culture guide you. And everybody's been able to rely on the Roll the Boat culture.
Coach, we'll end with this. What's your best recruiting story from the road? Maybe it's landing a guy you didn't think you were going to get. Maybe it was an amazing experience at someone's house. Maybe it was a nightmarish traveling adventure to go see a kid. But what's the all-timer for you?
Oh, I think if you ask my wife, Heather, I think one, because, she can't come out recruiting, but there's times she'll go on the trip with me just so, I can actually see her. And there was one time, I won't tell you where, but I do everything I can to eat. You know, I love to eat, and I love recruiting, and I love going out and eating. And we eat some very exotic things, and I'm all about it. However, I've kind of limited how much I eat now at people's homes to not offend anybody. However, there was one time when I was the head football coach at the prior school I was at, and we were recruiting in a certain area, which I won't tell you where. And I ate, and I'd love to eat prior to this. I mean, I'd be the guy just eat everything on the table, and I ate some spinach dip. And I still remember, I love spinach dip, and I got so sick in the middle of the in-home visit. I am just pale green, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure that I'm not going to throw up all over their sofa. And you got to keep bringing it and keep bringing it. And as I keep bringing it, I am just pouring sweat. I mean, who knows? I mean, my staff's looking at me like, oh my gosh, coach is really getting into this. Then they kind of knew that I was getting they knew that I was sick, and they knew it. But I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to keep going. And if I threw up, I was going to swallow it back down, and we were going to keep moving because we needed the kid. We get in the car, and I tell who's with me, the coach, I said, you have to get me somewhere fast because it doesn't matter where it comes out from, but it's not going to be good. And got me to a Starbucks. And I still remember that it was like a line to the actual bathroom. And I'm sitting, this can't be much worse. Not only that, I had 2 more home visits that night. And every time I went in the next home visit, they had this huge smorgasbord. And I'm, Coach, would you like something to eat? And Coach, you got to try this. You got to try that. And it was one of those experiences you'll never forget because I was so sick. And you still had to row the boat, man. You still had to change your best. And those next 2 places, you still had to eat and you still had to force it down. But I would probably say that was the most unique experience I ever had that people talk about on my staff to this day. And my wife, Heather, will always bring up to different people because that might have been as sick as I've been before. And I don't think I've ever had spinach dip in anybody's house ever since.
Was it worth it? Did you sign any of those 3 kids?
Oh, yeah. It was completely worth it. It was completely worth it. Yeah, they were game changers for us.
Well, thanks, Coach Fleck, for joining us on 24/7 Sports Social Distance, and good luck to you guys heading into the fall.
We appreciate it, Steve. Row the boat, Sky Mile, go Gophers. Thanks for having us.